the world of optical illusions, which is now effectively a realm of academic study, is all in search of evidence of how we perceive things based on, there may be more categories than this, but at least two categories of phenomena. One, where some heuristic, and we'll come back to what heuristics are in a second, but some heuristic in our perceptual apparatus decides something is one way or it's another. And a carefully presented set of data can be perfectly ambiguous between two possibilities. And therefore the brain, to the extent that, some prior bit of cognition or the way the light falls suggests one way, right? It sees it that way. And then if something changes, you may see it the other way. So, these sculptures, are they convex? Are they concave? The Necker cube, are you looking, which corner of the Necker cube are you looking at? There's those things. And then there are other heuristics where when something shows up, so, we have a frame rate in the eye. Many people will claim we don't have a frame rate in the eye because the frame rate isn't regular in the same way that a movie film would be. But we do clearly have a frame rate in the eye, which is why, for example, when a car with perfectly regular wheels drives into the parking lot, you may see them turn backwards because they advance not quite to the position of the other spoke, in one click of the frame. But in any case, you've got all of these cases where something in nature, if your retina saw it at this position and then that position, it would be safe to conclude that it had moved, right? So now if we flash things in a particular way, the Mario brother appears to move through the scene, but in fact, all the Mario brothers are perfectly static. Anyway, the point is that is exploiting a perceptual heuristic to cause the brain to conclude wrong things, right? That you can then test are wrong, like the checkerboard case that you show where the two squares look very different in hue based on a gradation, but in fact you can check that they're identical. So anyway, what I want to get at is these heuristics are there for your well-being, right? In fact, they're the key to any rational perception. If you tried to perceive every pixel on your retina and process it, you'd never get through a frame, right? It's just too much data, right? So you've got to break it down into chunks that are so reliable that you just get a huge payoff for using a subset of the data to draw the full conclusion. And it's very rarely wrong. But the fact that these things are riddled throughout our perception means that a magician or a person who is interested in creating optical illusions or a corporation that is interested in keeping you on their site all find them, right? In other words, they're littered through your perception for your well-being, but they are exploited by others all too easily because of their ubiquity and predictableness. So the question is, without an agreement that, hey, it's not cool to game other people's perception. I mean, maybe it is cool if it's a surprise party, and the point is you're going to enjoy the surprise party when it's revealed to you, so it's okay for me to take advantage of your trust briefly. But this isn't that.
The film The Game is a good example of that with Michael Douglas.
Say it again.
The film The Game is a good example of that with Michael Douglas, where you could have a entire false reality constructed for you that then the end of the movie is the curtain gets pulled off. However, you've been thrown through the ringer. You thought you almost died. And there's this question of what is an ethical sort of false reality or manipulation of someone else's experience. If, one way to do it, as you're saying, is you sort of reveal it at the other end. There's often transformational experiences or cults or transformational workshops, which actually do more confrontational alternate reality creation by manipulating your experience. But then they say at the end, it was all for your benefit. And there's this, I'm saying this actually because what my motivation for this work, which I don't often talk about, but when I was at Google as a design ethicist, the basis for this inquiry of how technology is impacting society has to do with what is an ethical, asymmetric, manipulative or persuasive relationship when something is influencing some of your evolutionary weaknesses in or outside of your influence, and when is that a grounded, ethical, humane relationship? Because in the degree of asymmetry between what technology knows about you that you do not know about yourself is going to grow. The number, if you point an AI at your brain, you think of the newsfeed as like a kind of a chess game where your brain is the chessboard, and you think you're going to scroll one more video or watch one more thing, and then you're done, and you think that's going to be it. but you have this asymmetric AI that's playing out a trillion simulations from all the little human voodoo doll animals that it's the human social animals that it's seen used Facebook with the exact same usage patterns. Like it's seen 1,000 other people watch those same cat videos, or 1,000 other people watch those, Bret Weinstein podcasts. And it's seen, what is the next thing that I could show you that would get you to stay? And it knows way more about that than you are aware of it, because it's literally ran more simulations. So the degree of asymmetry over time is going to grow, which means that we have to actually have a relationship with something that knows more about us than we know about ourselves, that is ethical or grounded or humane. And that brings us to, we shouldn't escape the topic that we're in, so I'm not trying to diverge us. So I know we keep opening up threads, but you then ask, like, what are other relationships where one party knows way more about our psychological weaknesses than another? You might think about a therapist who is licensed, who says, hey, I'm going to know your deepest, secrets. I'm going to know your deepest, vulnerabilities, your biggest concerns, your inquiries for yourself, your sexual identity, your relationship, how you feel about your romantic partners. They're going to know all that information, and they can't go use that to manipulate you so you spend more time in the therapy room, or they can't use that to sell it to some advertiser so that someone can basically say, oh, you have these kinds of anxieties. Guess which political party would love to know those anxieties that I would want to target you. So once we see it in that way, this is both opening up an inquiry, but I think we can leverage insights from different fields, whether it's psychotherapy, counseling, law. A lawyer knows everything about your vulnerabilities in your case more than you know about it, and you have to trust that agent to act on your behalf. And so, gosh, there's so many things that we can open up here, but where you get to in technology is you simply cannot allow categorically a business model based on exploiting that asymmetric relationship. What I like about this framing is it's a kind of a one and done way to simply nail the business model and say it's super clear. You would never have a therapist whose business model could be advertising to political parties to manipulate you based on what they hear, in the therapy room, or a priest who's sitting in a confession booth who listens to 2 billion people's confessions, literally like all the things that they know about you. Then they have, imagine worse than that, the priest has a supercomputer next to them that's literally calculating patterns of all confessions they've ever heard. So they're actually making predictions for the person who's about to walk into the confession booth before they even say the confession that's on their mind. They know what that confession is going to be, and they can sell that to another party. This is the kind of asymmetry of power we now have. And so, gosh, I know we're opening up so many different threads because we could still go deep into the evolutionary stuff and the cognitive biases, and there's so much to say there. But I wanted to make sure I brought that in.
Yeah, fascinating, and you're right. So many interesting threads. But let's see if we can nail down the point that you and I are converging on here. There is either a basis for trust. In the case of the therapist, there are actual regulations. There's ethical regulation, ethical being about the rules of psychology, for example, that say, for, just to take one example here, your therapist is not allowed to sleep with you, right? There's some sort of waiting period after you've left therapy before your therapist could start a sexual relationship with you, right? That's a protection because this person, as you point out, knows all about you and therefore would be in a position to manipulate you, right? And then financially speaking, there is an explicit contract that you have with this person. And so those protections, I don't know that they work or they don't work, but I know that the point is to establish a basis for trust that you actually know what it's made of, right?
That's right.
And then there's another kind of situation. So let's say that this is the flip side, where somebody is bound to you in a way that your trust isn't about the rules, but it's about the fact that they don't have an interest in using this against you. Right. So family members, for example, Heather has, I don't know that we've ever explicitly even talked about it, but it's very clear to both of us that she has the right within limits to lie to me for our collective well-being. Right. So, for example, if, I'm up against a deadline and I need to get something done and, our collective well-being is dependent on it, she may adjust what it says in the calendar about when it's actually due. Right. Now, there's a limit to how well that works because obviously I know that it's a possibility. But the basic point is, look, I know she's not going to use this to her advantage and my disadvantage. Right. So
she's not making money the more she lies to you, right? She's still using it for your best interest. And there's actually a shared partnership of, even your own children that creates skin in the game. So that relationship is grounded in a real sort of, sense.
Yeah. The term we use for it is shared fate. Right. Because we have shared fate. The point is if you're going to lie to me, you're going to do it honorably. Right. And there's obviously ways in which that, she started up with some guy and started lying to me, it would be the exact opposite. But in the absence of such a thing, she has license to figure out where the line is. And even if we slightly disagree over it, it's done with good intentions. And I should say, this is now uncomfortable, but I also find that my relationship with my children involves a huge amount of my gaming their perceptual apparatus. My kids are, 16 and 14 at this point, but this has been true all along. And it is always done in the context of humor. But the basic point is, some part of me knows that they live in a world in which they're going to be confronted with bullshit, right? Every waking hour, right? There's going to be advertisements, con men, algorithms, all sorts of stuff. And so I use the license that comes with humor to misportray things so that they will get really good at detecting falseness, right? And I know it works, and they know I'm not doing it for my benefit and against theirs. And so, it's rather like the example of your spouse having license. And in this case, it's even tighter because, you can lose a spouse, but your kids are your kids forever. So the question then is, what is the basis on which departures, in effect, the honorable shortcutting or white lies that exist in the context of family are effectively a heuristic, right, for family well-being, in the same way that your perceptual apparatus makes jumps in order for you to process things in real time. So the question is there a basis of trust? And this is a long way of saying the thing we can very clearly see when a for-profit corporation is engaged in finding your perceptual defects and exploiting them is that a transfer of wealth is directly possible, right? You have the ability to decide where to spend your money and where to spend your time, and they have an interest that departs from yours. And so they can effectively take time or direct wealth or whatever it is in some direction that you wouldn't have it go, to your detriment, and they can come out ahead by doing it. And I think, the ultimate upshot of this is, if they do that, that it actually deranges us collectively, something they didn't anticipate, right? The side effect is potentially fatal to humanity.